First Contact's Fatal Assumption. Supreme Commander Vexterra stood at the observation deck of the Eternal Dominion, her primary eyes fixed on the blue-green world spinning below, while her secondary set monitored the holographic readouts floating before her. Her scaled skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns of anticipation as she studied the preliminary scout reports of this newly discovered planet designated Southeast 3301, locally known as Earth. Fascinating, she muttered, her auxiliary hands adjusting the data streams. Simply fascinating. Fleet scientist Xerix approached, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking against the deck plates. Commander, you've been studying the indigenous dominant species reports for 6 cycles. Surely there are more pressing matters requiring your attention. Vexterra's bioluminescence shifted to patterns of mild amusement. Tell me, Xerix, what do you make of these humans? The scientist's crystalline structure vibrated in what passed for laughter among his kind. Hardly worth studying, Commander. No natural armor, minimal muscle density, no biological weapons, and their sensory capabilities are laughably limited. They can't even see basic thermal signatures. By all accounts, they should have been prey species. And yet, Vexterra's primary eyes narrowed. They're the apex predator of their world. A fluke of evolution, nothing more, Xerix dismissed. They've simply had no real competition. The local megafauna is primitive, and no other species on their world has achieved sentience. Vexterra expanded her holographic display, showing footage from orbital surveillance. Cities sprawled across continents, vessels crossed their oceans, and primitive aircraft dotted their skies. They've achieved planetary dominance without genetic engineering, without natural weapons, without any of the advantages evolution granted our species. Doesn't that make you curious, Xerix? Curious. The scientist's crystals dulled slightly. About what, Commander? They're barely into their atomic age. Their most advanced weapons still rely on chemical propulsion. Their space exploration is limited to their own lunar satellite. They're practically defenseless. That's what interests me. Vexterra's bioluminescence pulsed with intensity. How does a species survive to achieve technological advancement when they begin with nothing? No natural advantages, no defensive capabilities. She gestured at the anatomical hologram of a human, soft tissue, and neural matter. If you're so intrigued, Commander, Xerix's tone carried a hint of impatience. Why not simply add them to the Dominion? Our standard conquest protocols would be more than sufficient. Vexterra's patterns shifted to deep thought. No, this requires a different approach. I want to understand them first. Send in the observers. The observers? Xerix's crystalline structure vibrated with surprise. Commander, that's an excessive use of resources. Our stealth units are perfect for this mission. Vexterra interrupted. I want detailed information about how these humans think, how they solve problems, how they've compensated for their biological inadequacies. Something about this species doesn't add up, and I intend to understand what it is before we make any moves. As you wish, Commander. Xerix bowed slightly, his crystals dimming in deference. Though I maintain this is unnecessary caution, these humans pose no threat to us. As the scientist departed, Vexterra returned her attention to the planet below. Her bioluminescent pattern swirled with complex equations and probability calculations. She conquered 17 worlds for the Eternal Dominion, and each time, her thorough analysis had prevented costly mistakes. Something about these humans nagged at her tactical instincts. The preliminary reports from the observers began streaming in within days. Vexterra's patterns shifted rapidly as she processed the information. Humans showed remarkable problem-solving capabilities, often finding solutions that seemed counterintuitive. They compensated for their physical weaknesses with tools, but more importantly, they seemed to possess an almost pathological drive to understand and overcome their limitations. Fascinating, she muttered again, watching footage of human children learning to walk. They fell repeatedly, yet continued trying until they succeeded. They're born accepting failure as a path to success. A priority alert flashed across her display. One of the observers had been compromised. "Impossible," she hissed, her patterns flaring with alarm. The observers used the most advanced cloaking technology in known space. They were undetectable to species far more advanced than humans. The alert expanded, showing details. The observer hadn't been detected through technology. A human child had simply noticed unusual patterns in bird flight paths around the cloaked unit. The child's observation had led to scientific investigation, which had led to Vexterra's patterns froze in shock. The humans hadn't just detected the observer, they'd captured it. And now they were taking it apart, studying its technology, learning. "Recall all observers," she commanded, her patterns now pulsing with urgent calculations. "Initiate conquest protocols immediately." But as she gave the order, a new thought made her patterns dim with worry. If they could do this much with so little, what else were these humans capable of? She had a sinking feeling she was about to find out. Back on Earth, in a secured facility deep beneath the Nevada desert, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the disassembled alien technology spread across her lab bench. Her team had been working around the clock since the captured unit had been brought in, and they were making remarkable progress understanding its principles. "Who's watching whom now?" she murmured, a slight smile playing across her lips as she began to reverse engineer the alien stealth system. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to learn, adapt, and overcome. And now, thanks to one observant child and humanity's endless curiosity, they had their first real advantage in the coming conflict. The game was about to begin, and their opponents had already made their first mistake. They'd given humanity time to learn. The prey that strikes back. The orbital defense network was supposed to be invisible, completely undetectable. Yet somehow, impossibly, the humans had not only found it, they'd turned it against the Eternal Dominion's own fleet. Vexterra's bioluminescent patterns flashed with rage as another of her ships went dark, its systems completely shut down by a virus that shouldn't have been possible for humans to create. Her auxiliary hands clenched into fists as she watched the tactical display, showing 15 of her most advanced warships now drifting helplessly in Earth orbit. "How?" she demanded, her patterns nearly blinding with intensity. How did they develop countermeasures so quickly? Fleet scientist Zerix's crystalline structure had dulled to an almost opaque gray with shock. They then must have learned more from the captured observer than we thought possible. But to reverse engineer our technology to this degree in mere weeks. Weeks. A new voice cut through the command center. Dr. Sarah Chen's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression calm but with a hint of amusement. "Did you really think we only started learning about you when we caught your observer?" Vexterra's patterns shifted to combat alertness. "Explain yourself, human." "We've known about your kind for decades," Chen replied. "Those lovely stealth satellites you put in orbit, they were perfect, nearly undetectable. Except for how they affected local weather patterns, subtle changes in cloud formation, minute variations in precipitation. Most would dismiss it as normal variation, but Earth's meteorologists are very, very good at spotting anomalies." Zerix's crystals vibrated with disbelief. "Impossible. You couldn't have detected the gravimetric distortions without understanding gravimetric theory." Chen finished. "We didn't need to. We just needed to notice that something was causing irregularities and then start looking for the cause. Humanity's greatest weapon has always been our curiosity, Commander. You gave us puzzles to solve, and solving puzzles is what we do best." Vexterra's tactical mind raced, her patterns cycling through combat algorithms. "Even if you detected our presence, you couldn't have understood our technology. Your species hasn't even mastered basic quantum engineering." Chen's smile widened slightly. "We didn't need to understand how it worked to understand what it did. Your stealth systems created specific effects we could measure. Once we knew what to look for, we could start experimenting. The observer you so kindly provided just confirmed what we'd already theorized and filled in some gaps." Another ship went dark on the tactical display. Vextara watched in horror as its systems were systematically shut down, leaving its crew helpless but alive. The humans weren't even trying to kill them. Your conquest protocols, Chen continued, are impressive, methodical, and absolutely predictable. You rely so heavily on your technological superiority that you never considered what might happen if a supposedly primitive species simply watched, learned, and adapted. Xerx's crystalline structure began to resonate with fear. Commander, we're detecting energy signatures from the planet's surface. They're using our own orbital defense network to target the fleet. Impossible. Vextara's patterns flared. The encryption was based on quantum algorithms we'd never encountered before. Chen nodded. Very sophisticated. But you made them predictable, Commander. Perfect mathematical patterns that never varied. We didn't need to break your encryption. We just needed to recognize the patterns and replicate them. The tactical display erupted with new warnings. The orbital defense network, meant to protect the invasion fleet, was now systematically disabling every ship in Vextara's command. Not destroying, simply neutralizing. You know what I find most interesting about this situation, Commander? Chen's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. You saw our physical limitations as weaknesses, but they're the source of our strength. Because we're not naturally strong, we learn to make tools. Because we're not naturally armored, we learn to create defenses. Because we're not naturally equipped with weapons, we learn to turn anything into one, including your own technology. Vextara watched as her mighty invasion fleet, the pride of the Eternal Dominion, was reduced to powerless hulks floating in Earth orbit. Her patterns dimmed with the realization that she had catastrophically underestimated these humans. What now? She asked, her voice carrying the weight of defeat. Now. Chen's expression softened slightly. Now we talk. You have something we want. Advanced technology. We have something you want. The ability to adapt and innovate in ways your society never considered. I'm proposing an exchange of knowledge. Xerx's crystals brightened slightly. You're not going to destroy us. Why would we? Chen seemed genuinely puzzled. You've already given us so much to learn from, and we're very, very good at learning. As Vextara processed this unexpected turn of events, her pattern shifted to a new configuration she'd never displayed before, respect tinged with fear. She had come to conquer a primitive species, only to find something far more dangerous, a civilization that had turned its very limitations into advantages. The Eternal Dominion has never negotiated with, she began. Then perhaps, Chen interrupted gently. It's time for the Eternal Dominion to learn something new. We're quite good at teaching, too. In that moment, Vextara understood that the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted dramatically, not through force of arms or technological superiority, but through humanity's unique ability to turn observation into innovation, weakness into strength, and defeat into opportunity. The prey had not only survived, it had evolved into something entirely new. And the predators of the galaxy would need to evolve as well, or face extinction themselves. Evolution's greatest trick. The holographic display in the Eternal Dominion's war room showed a scene that defied everything Vextara thought she knew about warfare. Her elite shock troops, equipped with the most advanced combat systems in known space, were being systematically dismantled by humans using what appeared to be primitive projectile weapons and crude electromagnetic devices. They're using percussion grenades now, reported combat analyst Krell, his metallic scales rattling with agitation. Simple kinetic weapons that our shields aren't calibrated to stop because they're too primitive. Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm system, still maintaining that infuriatingly calm tone. You designed your defenses to stop energy weapons, particle beams, and plasma projectors, but good old-fashioned physics, that you overlooked. Vextara's patterns swirled with frustrated comprehension. Her troops' advanced armor, designed to withstand the most sophisticated weapons in the galaxy, was being defeated by chunks of accelerated metal and crude explosive devices. The humans weren't trying to match Dominion technology. They were circumventing it entirely. "Fall back to secondary positions," she ordered, watching another squad go dark on the tactical display. "Activate the autonomous combat units." "I wouldn't do that," Chen cautioned. "Your drones are impressive, but they have a rather significant weakness." Vexterra ignored the warning, signaling the release of thousands of combat drones. The sophisticated machines launched from their carriers, their quantum processors calculating billions of tactical possibilities per second. They were the pride of Dominion military technology, virtually unstoppable in conventional warfare. The drones lasted exactly 6 minutes. "How?" Vexterra demanded, her patterns nearly strobing with disbelief. "Those units have the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created." "Exactly," Chen replied. "They think perfectly, logically, predictably. Human soldiers. We're illogical, emotional, and incredibly unpredictable. Your drones couldn't adapt to tactics that didn't make tactical sense." Xerx's crystals pulsed with realization. They were using inferior positions, exposing themselves to fire, making mistakes, but they weren't mistakes at all, were they? "The greatest trick evolution ever played," Chen agreed, "was giving humans the ability to be intentionally stupid. Your drones couldn't process why anyone would choose an inferior tactical position, until that position allowed a squad to bring down an entire building on top of them." The tactical display showed more human forces moving into position, but their movements seemed chaotic, almost random. Vexterra's combat computers couldn't predict their next moves because their current actions appeared to defy basic military logic. "You're not fighting the way you're supposed to," Krell complained, his scales now a dull gray of confusion. "Of course not." Chen's voice carried a hint of amusement. "We're fighting the way we need to. Humans have been outgunned, outarmored, and outmatched by predators for our entire evolutionary history. We survived because we learned to be unpredictable, to use our environment, to turn our predator strengths into weaknesses." A new alert flashed across the display. Human forces had breached the perimeter of the Dominion's main ground base, but not through a frontal assault. They'd used the city's ancient sewer system, a network so primitive it didn't even register on Dominion scanners. "Your sensors are calibrated to detect energy weapons, power sources, and advanced materials," Chen explained. "They completely ignore things like water pipes, electrical conduits, and subway tunnels. You're looking for threats that match your level of technology, while we're using everything available to us, regardless of how primitive it might seem." Vexterra watched in growing horror as human forces emerged from maintenance tunnels and drainage systems throughout the base. Her troops, caught completely off guard, were being engaged at point-blank range with weapons their shields weren't designed to stop. "Did you know," Chen continued, almost conversationally, "that we've been practicing this kind of warfare for thousands of years? Not against aliens, against each other. Every possible terrain, every type of weather, every conceivable disadvantage. We've learned to fight when outgunned, outarmored, and outnumbered, because for most of our history, that's exactly what we had to do." The base's primary reactor began powering down, its quantum core disabled not by sophisticated hacking, but by the simple expedient of physically severing its cooling systems with shaped charges. "Your civilization evolved through technological advancement," Chen said. "You solved problems by developing better technology. Humanity, we evolved through adaptation. We solve problems by changing ourselves, our tactics, our entire way of thinking if necessary." Vexterra's patterns shifted to a deep, troubled purple as she realized the full implications of what she was witnessing. The Eternal Dominion had spent millennia perfecting its military technology, creating defenses against every known form of advanced warfare. But they had never considered the possibility of facing an enemy that would simply bypass that technology entirely, using methods so primitive they weren't even registered as threats. "Your next move," Chen suggested gently, "should probably be to surrender, before we have to demonstrate just how creative humans can be when we really put our minds to it." looking at the tactical display, showing her forces being systematically defeated by an enemy using tactics that defied conventional military logic, Vexterra realized she had no choice. The Eternal Dominion had finally met its match, not in a technologically superior force, but in a species that had turned adaptation itself into a weapon. The hunter becomes the hunted. They're in the walls. The message came through on all Dominion frequencies, transmitted by a panicked soldier before their communications went dark. Vexterra's patterns flickered with unease as she monitored the situation from her command center, now relocated to the supposedly secure orbital platform above Earth. Impossible, Zerix muttered, his crystalline structure vibrating with nervous energy. We've analyzed every millimeter of that facility. There's nothing in the walls except standard power conduits and structural supports. Exactly. Dr. Chen's voice cut in, somehow broadcasting directly through the command center's secure systems. Your sensors detected the expected power signatures and building materials, so you assumed everything was normal. But humans, we've learned to live in the spaces between, to find paths where none should exist. The tactical display showed another section of the ground facility going dark. Not destroyed, just silent. The Dominion forces stationed there seemed to simply vanish. "What are you doing to my soldiers?" Vexterra demanded, her patterns pulsing with a mixture of anger and fear. "Teaching them about human history," Chen replied. "You see, long before we developed advanced technology, we learned to use our environment as a weapon. Every street, every building, every shadow became a potential advantage. Your soldiers are experiencing what countless armies throughout human history learned the hard way. Never fight humans in an urban environment." Krell's metallic scales rattled as he processed new tactical data. "Commander, we're detecting movement through the facility's maintenance systems, but it's not matching any known combat pattern. They're using the ventilation shafts, the spaces between walls, even the garbage disposal systems." "Of course we are," Chen said. "Your soldiers are trained to fight in open combat, to use their superior technology and physical abilities. But humans, we're descended from prey animals who learn to hide, to squeeze into small spaces, to strike from unexpected angles. Now we're combining those instincts with our understanding of your technology." Another alert flashed across the tactical display. The facility's power grid was being systematically altered, creating electromagnetic dead zones that rendered Dominion sensors useless. "Do you know what makes humans truly dangerous, Commander?" Chen asked, her tone genuinely curious. "It's not our technology or our adaptability, or even our creativity. It's our ability to learn from everything around us. Right now, your soldiers are experiencing warfare techniques developed by Vietnamese fighters in Earth's 20th century, combined with tactics used by resistance movements throughout human history, all adapted to exploit the weaknesses in your advanced technology." Vexterra watched in growing horror as her ground forces were methodically isolated and neutralized. The humans weren't just fighting. They were teaching her troops a lesson about the true nature of warfare. "Your combat doctrine is impressive," Chen continued. "Perfect formations, advanced weapons, sophisticated tactics. But you never learned to improvise, to adapt your strategy on the fly, to think like your enemy. Humans have been doing that for our entire existence." The tactical display showed human forces moving through the facility like ghosts, using paths that shouldn't exist, appearing and disappearing at will. They weren't just defeating the Dominion forces, they were demoralizing them, making them question every shadow, every sound. "The most terrifying predator," Chen explained, "isn't the one with the biggest teeth or the strongest armor. It's the one you can't predict. The one that learns from every encounter and comes back stronger. The one that turns your own strength against you." Vexterra's patterns shifted to a deep, troubled blue as she realized the full implications of what she was witnessing. Her forces weren't just being defeated, they were being systematically educated about their own limitations. "Your soldiers are safe, by the way," Chen added. "We're containing them in secure areas. They're probably a bit shaken, maybe questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare, but they're unharmed. Because that's another thing humans learned long ago. Sometimes the most effective victory isn't destroying your enemy, but making them understand why they lost. A new message appeared on the tactical display, transmitted simultaneously to every remaining Dominion force on Earth. Look around you. Every shadow could hide a human. Every wall could conceal a trap. Every piece of technology you rely on could be turned against you. This is how humanity survived when we were the prey. This is how we became the predators. And this is why we're giving you one last chance to withdraw. Vexterra looked at her tactical display, showing more and more of her forces being systematically neutralized by an enemy they couldn't predict or counter. Her patterns shifted to the pale gray of resignation as she realized that the humans hadn't just defeated her army. They had fundamentally changed how the Eternal Dominion would have to think about warfare itself. Pride's last stand. Supreme Commander Vexterra stood alone in the observation deck of her command platform, her bioluminescent patterns dim and subdued as she watched Earth rotate below. The last 24 hours had changed everything. She thought she knew about warfare, about strength, about the very nature of evolution itself. You're wondering why we didn't just destroy your ships when we had the chance, aren't you? Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm system, no longer hijacking it, but now using channels officially opened for negotiation. The thought had crossed my mind, Vexterra admitted, her patterns flickering with curiosity. You had control of our orbital defense network. You could have eliminated our entire fleet. We could have, Chen agreed. But that's not how humanity has survived and thrived. We didn't become Earth's dominant species by simply destroying everything that threatened us. We learned, we adapted, and most importantly, we recognized potential allies when we saw them. Xerix entered the observation deck, his crystalline structure still dulled from the shock of recent events. Commander, the analysis of human historical records you requested is complete. It's unsettling. Show me, Vexterra commanded. The holographic display filled with images from Earth's history. Humans hunting creatures many times their size, surviving in environments that should have killed them, constantly adapting and innovating. But most importantly, it showed humans learning from their enemies, incorporating new knowledge, and growing stronger with each challenge. Your species has been at war with itself for most of its history, Vexterra observed, her patterns shifting to show deep thought. Not just at war, Chen corrected. Learning. Growing. Every conflict taught us something new. Every challenge forced us to adapt. When we weren't fighting each other, we were fighting our environment, our limitations, even our own nature. We never stopped evolving. Krill entered the chamber, his metallic scales still showing signs of stress. Commander, the last of our ground forces have been accounted for. The humans have treated them with respect. They're even providing medical attention to those who need it. Of course we are, Chen said. You're not our enemies anymore. You're our next opportunity to learn and grow. Your technology, your knowledge, your perspective on the universe, it's all something we can learn from. And in return, we can teach you something that the Eternal Dominion seems to have forgotten in its rise to power. And what's that? Vexterra asked, her patterns showing genuine curiosity. That true strength isn't about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about being able to adapt, to think differently, to turn apparent weakness into strength. Your civilization achieved technological perfection, but in doing so, you lost the ability to evolve. The holographic display showed a new image. Human children playing, experimenting, failing, and trying again. This is our true strength, Chen explained. We never stop learning, never stop questioning, never stop trying new approaches, even when they seem illogical or primitive. Vexterra's patterns shifted to a new configuration, one that reflected understanding. You didn't defeat us just to prove you could. You defeated us to teach us. Exactly, Chen confirmed. The universe is vast, and there are probably threats out there that neither of us could handle alone. But together, combining your technological advancement with our adaptability and creativity, we could become something entirely new. The commander's patterns brightened as she considered the possibilities. The Eternal Dominion has never considered true alliance with a less technologically advanced species. Then maybe it's time for the Dominion to adapt, Chen suggested. After all, that's what humans do best. Find new ways forward, even when they seem impossible. Vexterra turned to face the holographic projection of Dr. Chen, her patterns now showing the complex swirls of decision-making. The Dominion Council will need to be convinced. Then convince them, Chen said with a smile. Show them what we showed you. That the strongest species isn't the one with the most advanced weapons or the toughest armor. It's the one that can learn, adapt, and grow. Show them that in trying to conquer Earth, the Dominion actually found something far more valuable, a way to start evolving again. As Vexterra looked down at the blue-green world below, her patterns shifted to show something she hadn't displayed since the beginning of this encounter. Hope. The Eternal Dominion had come to Earth looking for another conquest, another species to subjugate. Instead, they'd found something unprecedented, a species that had turned the very act of adaptation into an art form. Dr. Chen, Vexterra said, her patterns now showing firm resolve. I believe it's time we began formal diplomatic relations, not as conqueror and conquered, but as civilizations that can learn from each other. That's another thing about humans, Commander, Chen replied warmly. We make much better friends than enemies. Welcome to the next stage of your evolution. Above Earth, the command platform's lights changed from combat status to diplomatic colors, signaling the beginning of a new era, not just for humanity or the Eternal Dominion, but for the galaxy itself. The Predators had finally learned that true strength comes not from domination, but from the ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow.